book discussion, check out 19 by Claire-Louis Bennett. The book is, I would say, it's a long poem. It's a book of poetry, and it's a very challenging book in some ways, and a very inspiring and soothing book in other ways. So it's an interesting book, something I have never read before, not my style. Like I said, it's really a long, beautifully written, poetic elaboration of a girl's inner thoughts and life. And I think that's one of the big advantages of this book, is to give me as a man an insight into the inner workings of a female brain. And the one thing I've realized while reading this book is that women function differently. They have different, they pay attention to different things. They're very, they really are very elaborate. Like a lot of the cliches, like they do care about, the color of something or the shape of something. There's a scene in the book where she is writing about her teacher some bad stuff, and the teacher writes back to her in a similarly sort of aggressive manner. And then the author, the autobiographic author, so the woman in this book, she says she wasn't sure what was more offensive, the thing that the teacher wrote or the handwriting by which she wrote that. So it's a very, I would say that this is a very female characteristic, or we would characterize this as female, that you actually care about the shape of the handwriting and you're not solely focused on the content. As a man, I would say the typical thing a man would do is just focus on the content and attack and make sure that whatever offense was made will be retaliated. This character, I'll just call her the author. She is the woman, Emily Louise Bennett. She is the author. She also, writes about stuff. I don't know if this is an autobiography or not. It doesn't really matter. I think the book is a piece of poetry anyway, and there's actually scenes in the book where she talks about the longing of meaning. She's in several parts of the book, when she sort of goes through her life, she describes how modern society is geared towards finding meaning, how reading novels is the importance of reading novels from the perspective of many people is to find meaning in those novels, things along those lines. So again, inspirational. I would say this book, it's like a long poem. It's like doing a sort of, not stretch, but like warm up before the actual workout. That's how this book feels. Like you're relaxing your muscles, you're relaxing your brain muscles, but while you're relaxing your brain muscles, you're actually inspired to let the thoughts flow. They're not necessarily directional, but there's thoughts, there's inspiration. So it's a nice book. Again, I was struggling a couple of times. I was going to put it down because there's no real plot. There's nothing really happening. I mean, there's one scene in the book where something happens, and I don't want to give too much away. But there's the connotation of philosophy. The book is also about books. The author is studies literature and reads books and mentions books. And then some of the takeaways in the book are that we are living in a society that imposes thoughts on us. So that's definitely, and one way to think about this is that a lot of the authors that we read, a lot of the stuff that we read is, well, why is it even considered literature? Why do we read certain authors? Why are they considered? Why is Dostoevsky considered Dostoevsky? Why is that important? Why don't we pay attention to other people's literature? Somebody made those decisions. Some authority made those decisions. The English department, or the Department of Languages, or the university, or the academics. So this author throughout the book is dissecting society from the perspective of not a nihilist, and the reason I'm mentioning nihilist is because Nietzsche is mentioned in the book, but from a person that is definitely very, that is questioning the current power structure, and not necessarily the power structure, but the fabric of society as it's designed by somebody, and that fabric is designing and forcing people into certain behaviors, and that certainly is power. This is a Not Even Wrong podcast. It's January 25th, 2023. This is Krim Delco. For the day, we're up 55 basis points. The market's down 20 basis points. For the year, we're up 19.3%. The market is up 4.4%. We're outperforming by 14.9%. Tesla announced earnings. I'm going to have a more detailed discussion of the earnings in another podcast, but overall the numbers are very good and very positive. And the company also has been very aggressively in guiding on volume and margins, and they've kind of reiterated a lot of the things that we spoke about in the preliminary to the earnings call. So it was a positive call, and the only negative I would say is I think Elon Musk was a little bit confused, distracted, and I would say that is probably a direct follow up on his on the unfortunate situation that he is in, where he works a lot at Twitter and doesn't have too much time focusing on the nitty gritty of Tesla. For example, there was a question about the cost of goods sold and how they can be reduced, and Drew Bellino made an effort to make the point that they're doing actions. They're not just waiting on inflation to abate. They're trying to optimize the powertrain, for example. And then Musk just said, kind of like, yeah, if we have a recession, then our costs will come down. So something completely stupid, not necessary. Maybe he meant something else. Maybe he thought that he's saying something more profound. But the way it came across is kind of like, it doesn't really matter what we do. If we have a recession, costs will come down. Something like that, which I don't think is very good for morale, to be honest. And my concern with the relationship between Bellino and Musk, I feel like it's a little bit strained, and I don't know. That was the only negative thing, but there's a lot of positive things in the call. But now let's get back to Louis Bennett's book. Again, check out 19. It's a very nice book. Really, it's a nice book. It's hard to read. It is a long poem. Lots of voluptuous language. She's British or Irish. I mean, she's definitely trained in sort of British literature, and that's just a vocabulary I'm not very familiar with. So there's a lot of words, a lot of holes there for me. But overall, I get there's really nice scenes. She talks about, let's say, she describes the apartment of her grandma or mom, and she goes like basically there's this boring apartment, but then there is a book that is a sort of description of 19th century serial killers, and then she said, well, this book is the sort of singularity that makes a somewhat boring situation look more interesting. So she would say things like that, which I think are, they're powerful. They're nice metaphor, nice picture. If this was a painting, if this book was a painting, I would be looking at this painting. This painting, it would be a sort of, not a cubist or any kind of abstract intellectual type painting. It would be a very nice, descriptive, maybe kind of like a impressionist painting. Maybe that's what this book would be, an impressionist painting. And I think it's a nice book. I keep saying the same thing. The reason I'm saying it's nice because I wanted to put it away. I was considering not reading it because it is difficult to read sometimes, but if you get into it, you start realizing that first, there is really no sense in a like deterministic, rational way. There's also the relationship between the author and Nietzsche, and there's a book that comes every now and then is mentioned, which is Beyond Good and Evil by Nietzsche. So Nietzsche, the nihilist, there's a certain scene where somebody dies, and that death can be related to the death of Jesus or the death of God. God is told, Nietzsche's sentence. So there is this question for purpose, question for direction. What is it we're doing on this earth? What's the purpose? There's a sarcastic and a little bit nihilistic way of describing things. the author talks about how school is in a certain way, and how we dress in a certain way, and how we date in a certain way, and how we fuck in a certain way, and how we do the, like, all these things that if you just step out of that for a second, you know, a lot of these things, we take them for granted. Well, we read certain books, like my son's now 15 years old, he's gonna read, you know, he's gonna read Moby Dick, he's gonna read Hemingway in high school. But then why? Why is he going to read that? I mean, who decides that, by the way? Why is that even important? Why doesn't he read something else? And those are the kinds of questions that this book puts out, let's say. There's no answers. That's maybe a little bit frustrating sometimes when you read books like this. I mean, they could be considered a critique on society. Maybe it's, you know, a little bit nihilistic like Nietzsche was. But where's the solution? You know, where's Karl Popper here, or David Deutsch with solutions? Okay, what can we do with all this? Where do we stand? What's the, I mean, not everything is negative. What's the positive? Like, for example, if we have this imposed let's say patriarchy or hierarchy, if we have this imposed hierarchy on us, that means somebody imposes it. It means somebody else can de-impose it and impose something else. There's freedom, there's agency, there's creativity. None of that stuff. The creativity part comes short. I'm not sure if I want to call this book a nihilist, negative, depressing kind of book. I don't want to go that far. I don't think that's fair. I think it's just simply the observations of a girl growing up, a woman that definitely is somewhat of a misfit. Like, she's not your career woman or the career author or any of that stuff. The end of the book is somewhat depressing. She doesn't fit neither the bohemian nor the housewife mortgage type stereotype. So where does she fit in? And if we really think this through, we might ask ourselves, so where do we fit in? What is our role in this world? And I think the answer to that question is you have to define your own role, and that's where she falls short. And I think I am happy to fill in that blank. Like, there is no role. Nobody gives you that role. The hierarchy imposed by society is just a hierarchy. The hierarchy is an abstract thing. It has no role. If you want to play on the ladders of the hierarchy, if you want to play the promotion and raise and promotion and level 1 and 2 and 3, you're going to end up in no man's land. You need to fulfill yourself with your own goals and your own purpose. That would be my takeaway from this book. And this ties this book to our principle stack that is obviously very Popperian. David Deutsch is even in the principle stack. David Deutsch is the beginning of infinity, which puts agency in people, because we have the ability to creatively design our world, to actually move forward, to do things that other entities in the universe cannot do. We have this. We have the ability to explain. We have the ability to creatively change stuff, instantiate knowledge into products and services, all those kinds of things. They're very unique to humans as we know it, and therefore they're an opportunity to get out of this nihilistic, call it trap that this author is caught in. The author certainly is caught in this trap. What's the purpose? Why am I doing what I'm doing? All of these questions are not being, I mean, they're being asked, of course, in a subtle way, but certainly not answered. And my answer to that is there is agency, but you have to define your own purpose. I think this is the main takeaway of this book for me. And I think this is a nice way to end this episode for new readers. Why am I discussing books? Why am I discussing this book of poetry here? It's because we're reading books here at Orange Capital Partners as not just a part of our pastime, but also as it's conditioning of our mind, as we say. We yoga, it's bending our mind, the ability to think differently. And I think, you know, Claire-Louis Bennett, she definitely opens up, let's say, my eyes towards this conversation of feminism and the far left that I'm certainly not associated with in any which way, has this point that the patriarchal hierarchy was imposed on us, and we need to find ways to do something else. Now, where I disagree with the far left is, well, they're just trying to impose their hierarchy on us, which is, well, I'm not happy with this hierarchy. Now you want to impose your hierarchy. I don't have an interest in neither of those hierarchies. So that's my first critique of the far left. But if we take this argument to the next level, okay, let's say hierarchies are imposed. So what can we do about it? Well, what we do, back to David Deutsch, we have creativity, we can take agency, we can take responsibility, and find our niche that is, not necessarily revolutionizing the hierarchy, but at least questioning, criticizing, and again finding the niche within the context of this hierarchy. So this would be one course of action that I think Emily-Louis Bennett misses. She certainly opens up my eyes towards this hierarchy in a very subtle way, again, in a very poetic way. This is a much more powerful way to, let's say, talk about imposed hierarchies than what, let's say, far left actionists would do, with say, well, the patriarchs and the right and the power and blah blah blah, and all of that stuff is, quite honestly, it's boring to me. But this is just from the perspective of a neutral person, a female that goes through life and observes things and then makes certain conclusions based on that, and you can agree or disagree. And a lot of the stuff that she says, actually, she has a point. And by the way, she's pretty, let's say, she's not necessarily even a feminist, because she's not saying that it's all like a patriarchal hierarchy imposed on us. She's also, there's a scene in the book where she talks about the women in this society that are just happy to waste the wealth that the men create for them. And this scene where she talks about chocolate mint and makeup and nice clothes and nice apartments and nice villas, nice holidays. So the women have found a way to take advantage of this patriarchal society, and they're to blame as much as the men who are putting it, who are imposing it on us. But it's not even a critique in a sense. Like, I don't think the author is attacking this power structure. All she does is just pointing it out. But she's pointing it out, and my critical brain is immediately reacting to it and is saying, well, okay, there's something off here. And what's off is, well, we have a hierarchy that is imposed on us. And I think that is really the main takeaway of this book, is the hierarchy is imposed. There's a certain hierarchy. Books are read, thoughts are formulated, conclusions are made, history has been written. All of these things are somewhat imposed on us. But then, okay, somebody has to impose something. I mean, we're not, we can't live in a completely postmodern world where anything goes. We can't live in a relative world where there's no substance. But then if we want substance, then we have to design a certain hierarchy. The cathedral has to be built. And I think it's, this book shows that there is a cathedral, that it's imposed on us, and it opens the door, the opportunity for agency to change the course, to change the cathedral, to redesign the cathedral, if there are things that, let's say, you don't like, or if there are things society doesn't like. And in that sense, maybe it's a metaphor for the perpetual power struggle, or between classes. It's a metaphor between the perpetual struggle between man and woman, or child and father, and all of these things. And they're natural things. They're natural things. They're not bad things. They're bad if they turn out into violence. But as a struggle, as a point of contention per se, they're not a bad thing. Thank you.